Welcome to Underworld UK, where Britain's darkest stories are brought to light. From the gritty streets of gangland London, Liverpool, Manchester and Birmingham, from Curtis Warren to the Cray twins to county lines and modern-day true crime, we cover everything. Bringing you new videos every week. Subscribe so that you'll be notified when the next video is put out.
In the world of organised crime, reputations are built on fear, violence and survival. And few names in Ireland's underworld carry that weight quite like Dean Fagan. Because this is a man who's lived both sides of that life. A career criminal with a reputation stretching across decades. A man tied to brutal home invasions, armed robberies and violent gang activity. And someone who at one point quite literally lost the part of himself to that same world. A hand blown clean off. But what makes Dean Fagan different isn't just the violence. It's the fact that no matter how many times he's been arrested, jailed, attacked or nearly killed, he always comes back. And in some cases, even more dangerous than before. This is the story of Dean Fagan, the rise of a prolific Irish criminal, the chaos he left behind, and the moment the life he chose finally exploded right in his own hands. Dean Fagan's story doesn't begin with headlines or notoriety. It begins in Dublin, where he grew up surrounded by the kind of environment that often feeds into the criminal world. From a young age, trouble seemed to follow him. By his early teens, he was already known to authorities, and as he got older, that reputation only escalated. What started as petty crime quickly turned into something far more serious. By 2011, Fagan was already appearing before the courts. At just 21 years old, he was charged in connection with a burglary at a car auction site in West Dublin. Alongside a teenage accomplice, he was accused of breaking into the premises, stealing a car key and being in possession of a knife during the incident. Even at that stage, there were signs of what was to come. This wasn't just opportunistic theft. There was planning, there was intent, and there was already the presence of weapons. For many, that kind of charge might serve as a warning, a chance to step back. But for Dean Fagan, it was only the beginning. Over the next few years, his criminal activity escalated rapidly, both in scale and in violence. By 2014, he was involved in a series of aggravated burglaries that would cement his reputation as a dangerous and unpredictable offender. In one case, a quiet family home was targeted late at night. A woman and a young child were inside when masked men forced their way in. They weren't there to steal quietly. They were armed, aggressive, and prepared to terrorize their victims. The woman was threatened, her home ransacked, and her sense of safety completely destroyed. Even though the items taken were relatively small, the psychological damage left behind was anything but. It was the kind of crime that goes far beyond theft. It was intimidation, control, fear. And Dean Fagan was right at the centre of it. In another incident around the same time, the violence escalated even further. A home in County Meath became the scene of a prolonged and terrifying ordeal. Multiple men forced entry, dragging a woman from her bed and binding her to a chair. For over an hour, she was held captive in her own home. A knife was pressed against her throat. At one point, a gun was pointed directly at her head, all while their 3-year-old daughter watched. The attackers demanded bank details, cash, anything of value. But when they didn't get what they wanted quickly enough, the situation only grew more dangerous. The house was torn apart, every room searched, and when they discovered a safe, the threats escalated again. They wanted the code, they wanted everything, but the woman didn't have it. By the time the group left, the damage was done. The victims were left traumatized, and the case would go on to become one of the most serious convictions linked to Dean Fagan. When the investigation caught up with him, the evidence was undeniable. Fingerprints tied him directly to the scene. He pleaded guilty. And in 2017, he was sentenced to several years in prison. But even behind bars, the chaos didn't stop. Because Dean Fagan wasn't just a threat on the outside, he was a target on the inside too. In October 2014, while being held on remand in Clover Hill Prison, Fagan found himself in a situation that could have easily ended his life. He was sharing a cell with a convicted murderer. At some point during the day, without warning, the man turned on him. He was struck in the head, knocked unconscious, and when he came to, he was tied to a chair using torn bed sheets. His head was bleeding, and standing over him was a man armed with a homemade blade. For the next 90 minutes, prison staff were locked in a tense negotiation. The attacker repeatedly threatened to slit Fagan's throat. At one stage, he even set a deadline, 10 minutes or the victim dies. Inside that cell, Fagan had no control, no power to protect him, just time running out. Eventually, after prolonged negotiations, the attacker agreed to stand down and walked out of the cell. Fagan survived. But questions were raised afterwards. There were suspicions that the incident might not have been entirely what it seemed, that there could have been some form of collusion or an ulterior motive behind it. Nothing was ever proven.
3 travellers tried to jump me today, with 4 of them all together. And they drove into where I was, right? Swear to God, man. They had 3 cars between them, and there's only 4 of them, right? And you know what? They had frying pans with them, frying pans. You ever see the likes, right? And I had a butter knife. And now I haven't got a scratch on me again. But Mr. Gavin, remember that site there at the side of the airport? Trust me, I'm going to be paying you a few visits. Me and my mates. We'll see who's who then, pal, yeah? Tell your daddy to put his socks up, because trouble is coming for you, you little ratchet. You're a dope.
But in the world Fagan lived in, even being linked to something like that added another layer to his reputation. Because in that world, perception is everything. And Dean Fagan was quickly becoming known as someone deeply embedded in chaos, whether as the one causing it or the one caught in the middle of it. By the mid-2010s, his criminal record was already extensive. Dozens of convictions, firearms offences, criminal damage, violent burglaries. And still, it didn't stop. In 2015, his name surfaced again in a case that shocked the public. 2 young sisters came forward with claims of a horrifying ordeal. They said they had been lured into a situation that turned into hours of abuse, restraint and violence. According to their account, they were tied up and assaulted over an extended period. The story gained national attention. But what made it even more disturbing was what happened next. Dean Fagan himself went on the radio and admitted involvement. He acknowledged tying the girls up. He admitted to hitting them. But at the same time, he tried to control the narrative. He claimed the story had been exaggerated, that it wasn't as serious as it had been portrayed, that there were other factors involved. He even suggested the victims had fabricated parts of the story. But regardless of how he tried to frame it, the damage was already done. Public perception had shifted, and his reputation as a violent, unpredictable figure only grew stronger. Around the same time, he was also linked to a separate incident involving a chaotic road rampage in Dublin. Multiple vehicles were struck. A Garda patrol car was hit. It was reckless, aggressive, and once again showed a complete disregard for consequences. By this point, Dean Fagan wasn't just another criminal. He was a repeat offender with a pattern: escalation, violence, control, and survival. But even with all of that, nothing would define his story more than what happened years later. Because eventually, the violence came back to him in a way he couldn't escape. In 2023, reports began to emerge of a serious incident in Coolock, North Dublin. Emergency services were called to a residential area following what was initially described as criminal damage, but it quickly became clear this was something much more serious. A man in his 30s had suffered catastrophic injuries. That man was Dean Fagan. His hand had been completely destroyed, blown apart. Initial reports suggested a firebomb had exploded while he was handling it, a theory that would make sense given his background and associations. But Fagan himself told a different story. He claimed it was a firework accident, something far less sinister. But in a world like his, stories are rarely that simple. Whatever the truth was, the result was the same. His hand was gone, a permanent reminder of the life he had lived. For many, that would be the end, a moment of reflection, a reason to walk away. But not for Dean Fagan, because not long after losing his hand, he was back on the streets, and back in the middle of violence. Footage soon emerged online showing a confrontation in Dublin's north inner city. Fagan, now missing a hand, was seen being confronted by multiple attackers. They were armed, one with a knife, another with a hammer. They advanced on him, striking, stabbing, trying to overwhelm him. But Fagan didn't run immediately. He stood his ground, deflected blows, and then suddenly he surged forward, catching one of the attackers off guard. It was chaotic, brutal, unpredictable. One of the attackers was left bloodied, the others regrouped, and eventually Fagan broke away, escaping down the street. It was a moment that summed up everything about him. Even after everything, even losing a hand, he was still fighting, still surviving, still refusing to back down. And in the aftermath, he did what many in that world do. He responded publicly, posting videos online, mocking his attackers, issuing threats, promising retaliation, making it clear this wasn't over. For Dean Fagan, it never is, because his story isn't just about crime, it's about a cycle. Violence leading to retaliation, retaliation leading to more violence, a life where there are no clean exits, no easy endings, just escalation, again and again and again. Over the years, Fagan has built a reputation that few can match. More than 80 convictions, multiple prison sentences, connections to violent crimes that left lasting damage on victims and communities. And yet, he remains active, still involved, still part of that world. And that raises a bigger question. What does it take to stop someone like Dean Fagan? Because prison hasn't, violence hasn't, even losing part of his own body hasn't. If anything, it's only hardened him, made him more determined, more defiant, more dangerous. And maybe that's the reality of a life like this. Once you're in it, truly in it, there's no way out. Only survival, and eventually, consequences. Dean Fagan's story is still being written, but one thing is certain, it won't end quietly.
And I'm a dual citizen, an Irish citizen with rights, and I'm being refused treatment to help with this. I'm being refused treatment by the NHS, which is a disgrace. And what's gas is a person can come in and jump off a boat and they can get what they want, which is a disgrace in this country. People need to start taking up arms now, yeah? Because I'm an Irish citizen and I have fucking rights. I'm in bits, I can't walk proper. I can feel serious pain in my chest, in my arm. No one gives a fuck. Oh, I swear, I just feel like I'm just going to drop dead. I don't even think I'm going to make it back. People in these hospitals need to be put down with their fucking families. Whoever doesn't do things right, their families be assassinated. And that's why I couldn't give a fuck what people have to say. You know what I mean? Dirty, filthy animals is all they are. They look after dirty, poxy immigrants that rape kids, they will, quicker than they look after their own citizens that have legal rights. But little monkeys jump off a boat and come on in and rape our kids and we look after us then. That's what they do. Yeah? The NHS, the HSE, the Irish government, the fucking government up here in the north, they're all the same. They're filthy animals. And you know what should happen? All these immigrants come into this country as illegals, yeah? Should be fucked into a big huge field with a big cage around that and fuck all these politicians and all these people's fucking families into them and let them fucking know what it feels like for them. Because they're filthy, dirty pricks. Animals is all they are. They talk to us like we treat us like we're fucking animals. Now they're fucking animals.